If you have an idea, see a gap in what you're delivering, an opportunity to be more efficient, an opportunity that will help you in your career that also helps the organisation that you're currently working for.
Did you always know that you wanted to lead things?
I can see a problem, I'm the right one to solve it, this is how I'm going to do it, and just backing themselves to be able to do that.
It's quite remarkable to see stories of risk-taking and leadership like Liz. Welcome back to the CEO Advantage podcast with my co-host, Millie Albers. I'm Paul Edginton, and today's guest is Liz O'Connell, who's the CEO of Kudos. Liz brings 2 decades of experience in the human services sector, working from the front line to executive roles as a director and strategic advisor for a number of social enterprises. With an educational foundation in social sciences and forensic psychology, paired with business administration, Liz has had lots of success in roles. And as you'll find out, Liz and I have worked together for a very long period of time. I'm a big fan and admirer of Liz's work. Liz, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
Welcome. So I did a little, before we met today, a little squiz on your LinkedIn profile, and I'm really, really impressed with your career and your progress and how you've got to where you are today. I think as a bit of an emerging young leader, I think that's why I'm really wanting to dive deep into how you became CEO. And did you know you always wanted to be a CEO? And should we start with our question?
Yeah.
What was your first job?
That's our favourite question. Liz, what was your first job?
Oh, wow. I feel weird about saying what my first job was, seeing as you just used the word young leader in my entry, but that's fine. My very, very first job was actually at a local Barnacle Bills, and I worked there only for a couple of weeks before realising I didn't quite get into the vibe of that place. And then my first real job that I really sunk my teeth into and made friends and really connected with was at Bilo. So Bilo doesn't exist anymore, but for those of you that aren't familiar, it is a supermarket, or was a supermarket. And I was in Nightfill, which gave me a really interesting opportunity, I think, to both go to school and enter into the workforce, but it wasn't fast food. It was all about friends and fun, and it was actually a really great role. I actually worked there for long enough to leave employment, my first job with Pro Rata, before I entered into my first real career job.
Wow.
So, it fit.
Cool.
Did you always know that you wanted to lead things, lead organisations, lead movement, lead change? Do you always have that leadership mindset from right way back then?
I think so. I always had the mindset of, curiosity of how things could be done differently. I think that's probably where it started. I would always be thinking about how could we make this more effective or more efficient, and then in some ways feeling like, well, can't expect someone else to do that. If I can see the gap, why don't I just fill it myself? And why don't I just change that for myself? And then I guess that's the foundations I see as what has led me into leadership, is that curiosity for thinking things could be done differently, and then not relying on someone else to make that change, and actually kind of like pushing myself into it.
We're going to explore some of the ways you've become CEO and some of the incredible things that you've done. One of the things that in all of our CEO Advantage podcasts we've asked CEOs is, so on your There's sort of 2 breeds of CEO. There's the professional CEO who's come up through the ranks of the organisation, and there are founder CEOs. So it would be fair, would it not, to categorise you as a professional CEO as opposed to a founder CEO?
Mm-hmm.
In doing that, then you've come up through as said in your bio, you've come up through the ranks from frontline, from Bilo all the way through to CEO. But you spent quite a bit of time as an executive working with me as a CEO and working with others. When you became a CEO, having worked so closely to being a CEO, so as an executive, then you became a CEO, was it as easy as you thought it would be, the transition from one to the other?
I'd say no, absolutely not. But I think that what I had the fortune of was spending time in the executive roles with really good guidance and insight to what being a CEO could be and was about. So I think that considering when you're in an executive role, you might have the ambition to be CEO, or even if you aren't in an executive role, you might see the CEO as being sort of, head of the decision-making, strong title. It gives, I think, a lot of weight, and there's an element that you would aspire for that from a career ambition perspective. Working closely to that role, I think you really see that it's about a lot more than just having a nice title and having a position that allows you entry into meetings and a diary that looks different to everyone else's. And actually, it comes with a level of influence over not just the business, but also like policy and stakeholders that you need to take really, I think, a lot of strong responsibility for. And what I saw through working very closely with Paul was that responsibility then is a bigger part of the CEO role than I think is traditionally thought of. It's not the, nice role that has a lot of flexibility in it. It's actually the role with responsibility for maintaining all of the engagement with all the different stakeholders. And that's probably where it's, I'd say, foundationally more difficult, but also more exciting. And so going for a role where you understand that this is actually about stakeholder engagement, and in the social sector, holding that social license really closely and presenting authentically on behalf of that. I think that's where it's also really difficult, because you have to balance that. What I'm talking about is, what I see as the really happy parts of the role. You have to balance that then with actually the business fundamentals, and you carry both, I think. And that's probably where it gets more difficult, because those two things can sometimes appear to be contradictory. And I think that's where, if I was thinking about the most difficult parts of being CEO that you probably wouldn't understand before you really sit in it, is when you need to make a decision that won't be good for both of those pictures. And you have to choose which one at which point in time is more important for the decision in front of you. And you have to do that largely on your own, because you don't have a team. And if you have a team, sometimes it's a bit compromised to involve them in those decisions. You have a board that you report to, who are essentially there to, as Paul would very clearly say, hire or fire you. and so that's a lonely space. I think that being a CEO is, and for me, really extroverted person, I don't cope well with the thoughts staying in my mind. Yeah, a CEO is a really isolated role for holding decision making.
So at which point of your career did you find that this passion, this drive for making a big impact in the human services and social sector?
I would say before I started my career, to be completely honest. Okay. When I was in high school, my best friend was involved with the child protection system, and it was through her leaving what was, I think, quite a wraparound of guardianship, turning 18 and being essentially left to her own devices, when I was also her same age, and we were kind of like, what do we do here? Around that time, I changed all of my uni preferences from wanting to go down there. I wanted to be a scientist. So I was going to be a forensic scientist. I wanted to work in like crime scene investigation. That was what all of my high school study was directed towards. And then I thought, no, actually, what I would like to do is work in a way to change the system that was hindering my friend, but also I could see it's not just her. There was like hundreds of children in that same gap in the system. I thought, what I want to do is work for an organisation that actually tries to fix this. And so studied in the social sciences area and found where I wanted to work, which was the connection to SYC. So I'm going a little bit off topic here, but I promise I will bring it back. It's so one of the only places that actually helped in that circumstance was SYC. So Service to Youth Council, as it was known back in those days, had a service that was about connecting young people who found themselves homeless with places to stay. And it was one of, or the only service that actually had staff within it that sat down and understood what was going on from a level of whole human understanding, not just you're here because this has failed and you therefore get X, Y, or Z that's offered to you. So when I finished uni, I knew I wanted to work for that organisation. They didn't have any roles going that were suitable, so I went for the one job that they did have, which was a receptionist at a site in the employment services. Went still with the direction of where I wanted to go out of that. So went for an interview and said to them, like, I'm here for a job, but I actually want to work over there. But I'll show you, give me this job and I'll show you everything that I can do really well at that one, and then make my way through the organisation. So I think, the point of me saying that is had it within me somehow to know that if I'm going to make the difference, I need to find an opportunity, find anything I can, the wedge in to have the conversation with someone that can help me make the next step, and then take it from there.
Love that willingness or that attitude. Just like, I know I want to work with this organisation.
Yeah.
I'm going to start here. I'm going to make my way up.
Yeah.
And was Paul the CEO at the time when you started?
Not at the time. Paul was working at the organisation. There was a different CEO when I first started on reception. And, one of the other things that I would say, is not a recommended move, but I did email the CEO after about 3 months. And
great. I love it.
And I was like, so I took this job with the promise that I would eventually make my way into that part of the business. I think I'm ready. Can I have a conversation about how that might happen? No idea what it meant to be a CEO in my very early 20s. And for me, it wasn't about, doing a move taking that move I can see now, wasn't the right sort of chain of events as the organisation might have liked it. But what I was seeing was the opportunity that I could contribute something, wanted to show that I was determined, focused, could make a big move where I needed to. And then when Paul came to CEO, I made sure that he equally knew who I was and what I was there for, and took, I think, every opportunity to say, I found this gap. I'm willing to go out of my way, into the volunteerism for the business to make something else happen, and continue following through.
And Paul, what were some of the traits? I'm guessing like this, willingness and this passion for the organisation when you came on board as a CEO. Are they some of the traits that you saw in Liz that you were admired by?
And you know what? It's interesting. After we've known each other for a very long time, that's the first time I've made the connection with, at a similar age, doing exactly the same thing. I wrote as a 22-year-old, I wrote to the CEO of Photo Corporation at the time and said, so I want your job. And so can I meet with you and just ask you how you get to your job? And he agreed to meet me. And when I sat in his office, I had no idea, even what to ask. I was so far away from all I knew was I just wanted to do it. But he was like, okay, what do you want to know? I was like, I don't know. I don't know what you want questions. So Liz having that drive, you'd like to think there are lots of people who have that, and lots of young people talk about having it, but almost none write to the CEO and then write to the next one, just to remind them that I've told the other one that I'm here and I'm here for a reason. So I'm just letting you know that I'm still here for that reason, and if there's something you want me to do to prove that I'm up for it, just give it to me. There is a theme, and Liz mentioned this as well, in terms of being an executive and then being a chief executive. There are times when you have to make decisions about what is right for the purpose of the organisation. Sometimes it's right for the purpose of the organisation, but it's not necessarily that comfortable for the organisation itself, let alone the people in the organisation. And you're taking risks with that. And so having people like Liz, if you're the CEO, having people like Liz, they're the ones if you're going to make a decision about sticking with purpose and taking big risks, as a CEO, you make a short list in your mind as to who you're going to let in on this madness. And so people like Liz who say, by the way, I'm here to do this great thing. The question in your mind then as a CEO is, can I trust them? Can I trust them to be part of it? Can I trust them to conduct themselves appropriately? Can I trust them to be competent? Trust doesn't mean I like you and I think you're great. Trust is like, I might like you and think you're great, but I wouldn't trust you to run anything. But Liz has always been willing to lean out of the train when most people wouldn't. And sometimes I would come up with ideas and say, Liz, or I would be onto something and I'd go, Liz, can you go check this out? There's not lots of people, again, within your organisation that you can trust to go, can you go check this out? Don't ask any questions about it. I don't want to hear an opinion about it, a judgment about it. I just want you to go look at it and then come back and tell me what you see. Most people don't have, sounds I don't know how to say it without it sounding really bullshit, but most people don't have enough confidence in themselves to take an instruction like that that's vague and not ask any more questions, just go and do it. And then come back with something really sensible. That's a kind of confidence, and it's also a willingness to take risks, and it's a willingness to trust. And so we were able to do some crazy things because Liz trusted me with those things. And over time, of course, I trusted Liz to do those things. And I would say that as a CEO in any organisation, it's really scary if you can't make a short list like that. If you don't have Liz's. And we and fortunate at SYC, we were able to make a short list at board level. We were able to make a short list at executive level. We were able to make a short list at management level of those people you're going, if we're going to do something really a bit out there, who are we going to pick on the team to lean out the window? Who's going to watch out for poles and trees coming past and pull us in at the right time?
I think that you're right, Paul. What finding, I guess from your side, thinking as CEO, and I will, in the reflection you're just having, think of myself as, an executive in that space. I think it's finding willingness to work through the fear and show some vulnerability with that. And I say that's a characteristic that I would carry now into being a CEO as well, where you know something is going to take you putting yourself on the line, either by reputation or by, doing something that's a bit risky. It might be a bad decision. It might not go very well, and you kind of don't know what the outcome might be. But at the same time, a willingness to live through that no matter what happens transparently, I'd say, is what builds that trust. It's the identity of identifying this is a little scary because it's unconventional, or it's something that someone else hasn't tried, or it's we're going to say something that others don't say but they might think, but we're going to say it out loud and actually back ourselves with that, making a quick or clear decision, and then with the best information you have, and then like changing that and not being afraid to say, yeah, I made that call and it didn't work out exactly as we thought, but now we're going to try this instead. I think creating that dynamic as a CE with your executive team, and I'd say with your board as well, but definitely between CE and executive team, is what's actually really, really important, because to have an organisation that wants to be innovative, you have to have people that are willing to do things on the best information they can with the best behind them, the best interests of the business and the best interests of the client group behind them as well, but also understand that might all not be safe. It might not always go very well. And I think you create that trust even where things don't go well by being able to speak about it and being really transparent and authentic, owning the decision. I'd say that's something that Paul and I have both done very well, even where we've made decisions that maybe either each other or the business doesn't like. It's, holding that and saying, yeah, but it's part of my role to make decisions, and sometimes they will feel great and sometimes they might not feel great, and sometimes they will be good outcome and other times not. But however that happens, it's not looking over your shoulder going, it's your fault or your fault or your fault, but actually like owning that for yourself.
I think as well, having the ability, when Liz talks about being willing to be vulnerable and take risks, is to go to get to the part where you're like, I have enough information to make a decision. I don't have all the information and I don't have all the answers, but I have enough information and enough of a view of what the outcome's going to be that we're ready to move.
Yes.
And we may not know all the answers now, but we're pretty smart and we're going to learn along the way. And that learning mindset is interesting as far as, that whole notion of when you think you've made it, you stop learning. It's when you haven't quite yet, so you're still alive to, okay, I better learn and watch. We're really good at that. You've got enough information to go. Can I give you an example of one of the things Liz did? If you're an up and coming manager and thinking, what is this risk taking as an executive, or at that stage Liz wasn't even in an executive role. But for many years, SYC liked the idea of engaging with young people who'd experienced some pretty tough things in their life. And we had had young people participate in doing a video, and it had gone really well. And then some producers who liked it said, we'll volunteer and we'll actually do another version, but we'll add some more studio and script writing and all of these different things. And Liz came back and said, so we're going to do this thing, but this time the young people are going to be in charge of the script and they're just going to say whatever and we're going to accept it. And I just need you to say yes. I was like,
So cool.
holy mackerel, this could go really badly. What if they say, you don't know what they're going to say, but what if they say some of the things we've heard them say before? And she said that she did that. Do you see what she did? She goes,
They probably will.
And then she's like, well, they probably will. And then we'll have to handle it. Like, cool. Well, that's taken the conversation to a new level. So rather than us being so careful that we don't put ourselves in a position to handle it, why don't we see what happens and then see if we can handle it? And we did. And they produced the most incredible thing. It was a most incredible piece of work. And then we launched it at the Mercury Cinema and it was just crazy good. But the one thing that did come out, which was SYC's got lots of, and organisations like SYC have lots of social science professionals. And social science professionals have a methodology and they take it very seriously and they've studied and put a lot of energy into it. And to see the way young people spoke about them, it was kind of like, ooh, this people are not going to like that. They referred to, remember that?
I do remember that. I think my takeaway from creating, what was is we allowed a group of young people who had really no connection to school, to housing, to things that I guess people would say are, the structures that would be needed for them to become successful in young adulthood, really marginalised in terms of their interactions. But we gave them an opportunity to tell their story the way that they wanted to tell it. They'd had a lot of professionals around them trying to, create their story into case studies or talk about the outcomes they'd achieved on behalf of like services and programs. And what we were doing with that activity was saying, well, let you tell your own story that in the world, the way that you view it, through the interactions with services, so we can learn both about how we can better support you, but also we can validate the fact that we don't think we understand everything and that this is an opportunity for you to really feel like we're trusting you and giving power to you and allowing that to happen. So that's that's an interesting reflection that you've had, Paul, because I think that what that interaction and that activity as doing a movie together taught me was the reality of when someone, when you put an expectation on a group of people, and I'd say this is exactly the same when I'm talking about staff and employees in a business as when I'm working in the front lines on a social services program with a group of young people, whatever you expect them to do or to live up to and whatever kind of respect boundary you set or level of trust you expect out of them or level of participation, if you make that really clear, they can live up to it. And it doesn't matter. I think what we were finding, or definitely what I was finding, in those days I was working in with young people that were involved with the youth justice system and had a lot of child protection involvement. And there was almost an expectation by services in those days that these young people might cause trouble or might damage something or might, do something that behaviorally is inappropriate. And I would say, well, when I would meet with that group of young people, if I was working with them, I'd say, look, here's how I expect to be treated. Here's how I then offer you the same. And your interactions and vice versa, it's mutual respect. And when we did the movie, that was really, even for myself, I was feeling a little bit anxious when I did turn up for the first screening with the chair and the CEO in the same theatre as myself. But what I had expected and what did happen was by saying, this is an opportunity, this is what we're expecting, but at the same time, we're willing to be here and we will continue supporting you no matter what you produce, meant that we ended up with a really wonderful outcome. And we actually, the grander outcome beyond just seeing that a movie was made was that we had a group of young people that turned up every week, started engaging in eating properly, that we used the script writing to actually learn literacy, to do handwriting and to learn how to engage in things. We were doing, group participation and communication skill, problem solving, where people had different ideas of how things should be filmed or not. And we ended up with a really engaged group of young people and a movie that celebrated their story and showing that we had an organisation that was willing to put that what I'd say is somewhat paternalistic part of the social services sector behind and say, actually, we're here to, make sure that there's platforms for people actually within these systems to talk on their own behalf. And we're not going to do that for them anymore. And then from there, I think for SYC, it really, after I'd done that or we'd done that, it opened the doors and everything else.
Kept doing, finding different platforms for doing it. Some of those, what's really interesting from what you're talking about there as well, Liz, is when you look at staff surveys and some of the things that demotivate staff the most, one of the top things that comes up all the time is micromanaging. And I think what Liz is talking about there as well is how people thrive in the absence of micromanaging. You get micromanagers saying, oh, yes, but if it's not done a certain way, it's like, okay, so you make the expectation clear that it has to be done a certain way and then get out of the way.
And make it safe for them to do it in their way with the right outcome being achieved. And I would say that, I've obviously had wonderful mentoring through my career from a professional side. And I'd also say that the other half of that progression for me has been taking what are really the fundamental skills of being a good practitioner, walking alongside of people that do need support, but at the end of the day have determination on their own world and applying that to leading the organisation and assuming that everyone turns up to give their best and assuming that everyone can perform at the right way and everyone's there for the right outcome and allowing for what is, the blessing of a couple of hundred people all contributing that to be what the outcome of the business is rather than scripting or creating too much, like you say, micromanagement is, I'm not detail oriented and that would drive me crazy as much as everyone else. But I think what I am very clear on is expectation. So there's the management part. And in micro level, I think that's where we would avoid it. But having clarity on expectation, clarity on deliverable, clarity on what good looks like is what creates a really good engagement, I think. Yeah.
So what started off as a bit of a marketing campaign just turned into the most authentic, pure project that opened up a whole new world of possibilities and that obviously the outcome of that was that you were able to improve SYC services, you were able to say, okay, what else can we do? Like I think that's, that's
we
awesome
took
project.
A group of young people and gave them microphones in front of a few thousand people without scripts. We stopped telling stories on behalf of people and I think that was huge.
It was one of the things that when you, as Liz says, move away from this idea of paternalism or privilege, and you speak on your own behalf, the thing that you don't expect to happen as an organisation, as organisational leaders, is to go, oh my goodness, we're learning as fast as they are. So rather than us thinking we're teaching you something, by creating this level of we're expecting you to do this for yourself and setting that expectation, and we're taking a risk with that, I think the bit that you discover is like, wow, you start learning really fast because you're now at this new threshold of like, I'm making new decisions as well. And then if you get someone like Liz on your team, then somebody who's going to go, okay, you know how you took that risk and it didn't really blow up? I've got another one for you. Let's see if this one, let's see how this one goes. And Liz put young people, we would have a gala quiz night at the entertainment centre. We did that for a decade where we'd have 400 or 500 or 600 people in the entertainment centre. And Liz came up with the idea of why don't we just let young people who are have had some pretty, again, terrible experiences get up on stage and speak. And I can remember as the CE going, about what? And she said, I don't know, we'll see what they say. Are you kidding? So wait, this is a room full of, and you're just going to, and she said, yeah. In fact, we're going to also give them a table. So they're all going to come as guests, sit at a table, and they'll be like our guests of honour and they'll be the key speaker. And it was like, oh, this could go really badly. And not only did it not go badly, a young woman called Amy Rose, that was her name, wasn't it, got up, and it was one of the most compelling speeches I've ever heard from any person. Wow. And she was so powerful, and she told this story of herself with such dignity and such power, and how it hadn't overcome her yet, and it wasn't good. The things she was saying were like horrendous things that had happened to her, yet she was saying it in a matter-of-fact way of going, well, it's not going to define me and all of those things. And she spoke so powerfully. Again, it was one of the best speeches I've ever heard anybody do, from world leaders to any. It was just one of the best speeches. Then she finished her speech with this whole room in awe, and then she went back to her seat, and I nearly ran over to tell her how wonderful it was. And there was this tiny young woman going, was that okay? So, are you kidding me? That was the best thing ever. But it was on stage, she was this huge presence. And then when you saw her, she was like, the vulnerability of her, she was just a young person who just did something amazing, who the whole world wouldn't have thought could do something amazing. So as an organisation, we learned something new and learned something new about ourselves and what young people were capable of. And we thought we believed in young people, but after that, so that wouldn't have happened without Liz as an executive sort of going, well, if I got you to take that level of risk, I've got a new one for you. And that one went well as well. So she's kind of, you can see she's been on a roll of getting things right. So ask her what ones didn't go so well.
Should we jump into that one? What ones didn't go so well?
Maybe not at SYC, but maybe from a career point of view where you've tried to take a risk and the inertia's kicked in and stopped you. In my 25 years as a CEO, one of the hardest things to find was a consulting and advisory firm where they'd actually been CEOs. I created CEO Advantage to be the advisory firm I was looking for. Go to ceoadvantage.com.au and find out how we can help you and your team be the best in the business. You haven't always had an easy run with going, here's a risk for us all to take. Sometimes you've done that in sectors or spaces where there's like complete resistance.
Yeah, that's right. I think, we have to find places to give ourselves to that are open and willing to do things that we want to do. And I'd say I do sit on that, the side of opportunity versus risk. If we're looking at the one coin, I like to find opportunity in things that might feel a little bit risky because I think that's how we push ourselves. And I also think that there's an obligation on us if we're in a leadership role to make sure that that's happening and that opportunity is given to those that we support and those that are around us as well. I think where I haven't always had sort of the dream path. I think there have been, as with everyone, opportunities to learn and to do better. And over the last few years, I've tried to be involved in different sectors. I've tried to work in spaces of leading much smaller teams with much more refined objectives. Working with founders of small entities, where I think that my learning out of that is just to take on the risks that you can manage for yourself and not expect always that other people are willing to go on that journey. And maybe there are some organisations that aren't quite there in terms of their ability to sort of reflect or grow or think differently. I think where things haven't worked out necessarily all that well as well would probably be where I maybe go a little bit too far and don't have the bowling edges to kind of go, all right, no, get back on track as well. Because I think that, there comes a level of self-reflection that's really needed, especially if you're in that high dynamic, sort of innovative, change-making, very comfortable in ambiguity. Like I sit in spaces where Paul and I do it often together, where we sort of fly in this, let's change the whole world, and can see this grand picture of how exactly all these systems are going to interact, everything's going to come together, and then trying to talk to other people that I might need to work on, and they're like, just tell me what A, B, and C look like. And my brain just like has this huge like fizzle out trying to get to, get to that level of clarity. But I think that all of that's part of the journey. And I think understanding more and more about myself, especially over the last few years where, I've been for roles that I haven't been successful in. I've been always through that seeking feedback. I've been putting myself out there as a consultant for jobs that you are unsuccessful in or that you don't do necessarily always what the customer wants at the time that they want it, and taking on all of that as opportunity to learn and grow and take feedback and sort of sit with that and be comfortable being really uncomfortable is probably where I'd say that the flip of the learning is, because I'm very comfortable in the pushing boundaries, and I'm very comfortable in owning decisions where I have control of those. And I think for anyone, I'd say there's not many people that feel comfortable in a space where you might hear that what you would like to do isn't what a business wants, or what you would see as being an opportunity isn't what they want to step towards. And managing that, I think, will always be a work in progress, but it's something that I really try hard, and I'd say is where self-reflection is really important.
So your journey into Kudos, you've been CEO of Kudos for about 5 months now.
Yeah, it's very new still.
Yeah, still quite new. So how did that look like? What were the process involved? How did you come across Kudos? And
yeah, well, I'd worked in this sector for quite a long time, and what I mean by the sector is in across the human services. It's a really strong part of my career was to work in entities and within the industry that really helps people. What I had the benefit of with working with SYC was an organisation that was really self-directing, so not bound by any church or politics. It was very much an independent organisation, all about the social purpose. And I think we designed that very, very well. I took a couple of years between SYC and Kudos and worked in consulting, had a really wonderful, boutique consulting firm that allowed me to grow the human services consulting arm of their business. And it was through an engagement in that entity that I came across what Kudos was doing. And what was attractive to me when I saw that the role had come up was, that they are an independent organisation that is the first in the country to become a public sector mutual. So this entity exists because a group of a state government organisation decided that they wanted to become an entity of themselves to maintain a piece of work that otherwise would have been lost in the market when the NDIS came to fruition. So the work that Kudos does is really all about, making sure that there are adequate supports and services for mainly children that have signs of developmental delay or possibly disability, get access to what they need and educate the parents and all of the network around them to make sure that the supports are in place, and then continue providing ongoing therapeutic supports and services to really, connect and grow the capacity of the individuals involved in systems. The activity of the business that I've just described is, I think the good work they do. The reason I wanted to become the CEO there, though, was just seeing the opportunity of what I saw from the outside being a mutual employee-controlled business where my assumption coming in was that we would have, a couple hundred people that were so strongly determined to deliver something. The opportunity to lead them to make that reality was really, really attractive. And I think that what I was able to demonstrate, I went through a recruitment process for this role and did put a lot of effort into thinking through, all right, what would I want to see as the outcomes of this business rather than just sort of the activities that it provides, and taking on a lot of what I'd learned through my time at SYC and then through my time of consulting at going, well, I think if we really break it down, let's make sure that we have an entity that is delivering really strong on its social agenda, has to have really high engagement of its employees, has to be really innovative. And I think that was my main attraction here, as well as the things I've already mentioned, because where you have an independent organisation that does exist somehow for itself, your opportunity to improve its level of innovation. That's an area for us to, I think, grow. I've only been there 5 months, so I can't speak to any examples just yet, but I think that's where there is opportunity to take that learning and really reapply it.
And looking at your employees now, what ideas they might have that,
Absolutely.
To take away that micromanaging, you really, like you said so beautifully, your role now is to lead them to make sure that they can.
And provide them, I think, with not just an opportunity, but also making sure that they feel comfortable in doing new and give it. And I think that's something that I would often see, definitely in social purpose entities where you don't have a lot to work with. The difference with, I've worked alongside of the startup space as well, and Kudos is only a 5-year-old entity. So I was seeing that this is a startup really, but it is operating as a not-for-profit. The challenge is there as opposed to if I was running a traditional 5-year-old business that could take capital investment, is I can't use the same levers that make a young organisation grow into itself. So the only resource that we have as a not-for-profit operating organisation is the value that its staff are willing to give it to do more than what it currently is funded for. And I think that only comes if you can engage everyone in feeling like they're connected to why they work there. Otherwise, you end up, you could have organisations that run really well with people turning up and doing a really grand job of just their current job. And that organisation will exist for as long as that current job exists, which in our industry is 3 to 5 years, because that is how the reality of things are funded. If you're lucky, actually, because in the disability space, it's possibly even less than that. But if you think about that, you could have well-running organisations for lifetimes of contracts. And the only thing in this whole sector that makes, I think, progress happen is the willingness of people that work in it to do a little bit more and to give a little bit more thought and to identify gaps. And that's not always in the job profile. I think it takes an organisation to expect that and to want that and to show that they're committed to doing something with that actually, and I mean like with the ideas and with all of the extra investment, showing that you're willing to go down a path of new or put some funding, internal funding behind a level of innovation is actually where the opportunity is. And that's really what I'd say is my biggest challenge now in this role, is taking what is a 5-year-old entity that has, really slim balance sheet, so it can't reinvest in itself, and just really engaging its group of amazing workers in thinking, what are we going to do beyond our current dynamic, and what should we do to achieve our broader social purpose, and how can we, tweak the edges to make sure that we stay alive while we're trying to make that happen.
My challenge in that space as well to any commercial founder or commercial CEO is to listen back to what Liz just said and go, wouldn't it be great to have people in my commercial operation that thought like that? And particularly in the context of Liz saying, so thinking of ways to do more, to get more out of it, to go that extra bit. The bit that Liz leaves out, and most not-for-profit leaders leave out, is that they do all of that and get paid less. So often, it was interesting when I ran SYC, I was fortunate to win the Social Entrepreneur of the Year award in 2019. And when I went through to national judging, it was interesting sitting with the judging panel with all the commercial ones, and I was the social one, and having this approach of like, oh, it must feel good. And I'm like, so let me reframe the way, like, it feels as good as anybody else. If I would say, and I said this during the judging, maybe this is why I didn't win the national part, but during the judging was, if I ran a for-profit business that employed 640 people across 70 locations around the country and had grown its balance sheet from almost zero to multi-million-dollar property portfolio and cash and all those sort of things, and it was called Paul Edginton Proprietary Limited, you'd be going, you are a legend. Instead, you're patting me on the head and going, mustn't that feel good? So I did all of that as an entrepreneur with one hand tied behind my back, because you can't have capital. Mm-hmm. You've got to keep your social license to operate. You can't make mistakes because, heaven forbid, you waste any money or something happens that goes wrong. But for-profit people can do all of those sort of different things. So there is a mindset, though, that somehow people as talented as Liz are supposed to work at this extreme level of success. And then if you say, how much should we pay someone like Liz? You'd go, well, for that kind of talent in the for-profit world, you'd pay, for example, what do you reckon the CEO of British American Tobacco gets paid?
Oh, I'd hate to think.
Yeah.
I really would hate to think.
How much does Liz get paid, and who's adding more value to the world?
Yeah, exactly.
Why is this a thing? It's quite remarkable to hear stories of risk taking and leadership like Liz, and then the world sort of then thinks she's got to do that at a discount, but we do.
I think that crossover, Paul, is something that you and I have really connected on over the years, though, because I think both sectors can equally learn from each other.
Yeah.
Because we started in an organisation that was very much like very traditional social services organisation, where you approach it from a almost like empathy or sympathy level of trying to help people. And actually what you're there for is to help them achieve something they want. You're not there just to make them feel better. And I think that actually being able to record that or measure that, record that, play that back as their success, and that you are there to make sure that they are successful. In the same way as you would manage, a customer in a commercial entity, you're there to make sure your customer is successful, and you have to give them the information so they can understand how they've been successful because of the work that you've done. And moving that mindset in and out, so taking the commercial mindset to, expecting your leaders to operate really well, from commercial into the not-for-profit space. I think it also works for our actual, our industry of workers to be able to, be expected to perform really well. And that's not, dirty word performance in this sector isn't about, we expect you to be nice to people and, oh, that's lovely work that you do. What we're trying to say is, and I think in both the roles that we've led and what I'm embedding into Kudos as well, is an expectation that, we are here to deliver a job, and that job is to make sure that our customer, our client, our participant, however you want to refer to them, the people that need our services are successful. And we need to make sure that we prove the value of our work. We need to make sure that we can show them what they've achieved through the interactions with ourselves. And then we celebrate all of that achievement and record that and really make sure that that's very, very clear to the sector. Because we offer a huge amount of value. All entities, I think, operating in this space should have to prove the value that they deliver as well. It's not just sort of nice services. This is actually like fundamentally really good services for the economy, really good services for what is socially good for all of us to work together. And I think that, bringing the mentality of the commercial and the NFP sector together is actually a really important discussion, and hopefully something that is getting, I think it's getting more and more attention, because there's really I would say, not a lot of difference.
Tax status. That's the only difference is tax status.
And actually I would say we probably have more reporting requirements than if I was running a 5-year-old entity of nearly any other kind, because we are held to the higher, social license, as well as then government expectations, as well as the political arena, as well as all our employees and our customers, and reputation, I think, is something that we have to protect in all of those ways.
So you talk a lot about innovation, and I imagine, being a non-for-profit, you don't have the biggest budget in the world to invest in innovation. So how do you utilize that, and how do you almost, I suppose it's a bit of your role as well, to try and come up with really interesting business case studies to then convince the board or convince the finance team that we need to delegate this amount of funding for this particular project that will add so much innovation to.
Gosh, Millie, I wish it was that simple. I think, that the really shameful fact is, in the not-for-profit sector or any service that relies on government grant funding, you don't have an innovation fund, because that funding is tied to an activity that is not innovative. It's saying, we're going to pay you to deliver X, Y, and Z in the way that we've prescribed, in the way that we've done it for a number of years, and in a way that's safe and tested. And anything that you don't spend on doing that activity, we'd like to have it back, please. You don't get to kind of create things or be innovative in the same way that I think it would be wonderful to have self-running innovation funds. I'm going to work on that with Kudos. We do some fee-for-service activity, and that will be about establishing up a self-managed innovation fund within the business that will take ideas out of what, for new services. But I'd say even present day innovation, some of the things that we can do now are more about creating efficiency through the use of technology in the social sector. That's where innovation, I think, still has a part to play, even when we're talking about, contract and actually, like, it's not about necessarily redirecting funding to something. It's about looking for the interaction points that we can utilize technology or systems from other industries to make our work more productive. That's where I think first run of innovation will be, definitely for Kudos, and I'd say for lots of organizations. And I think that what happens when I talk about this in our entity and in many others, actually even before I was with Kudos, I remember talking about embedding technology and allowing for self-service customer interactions in social services and being met with some very sort of I'd say like boundaries and big barriers up from people that would say, you have challenged our complete professional identity by assuming that technology can play a part in the human-to-human interaction. But I really fundamentally believe it can. And I think that that's how we will create the buffers in how we make our money go a little bit further, how we create innovation, but also how we keep up and move and really transition or evolve into the new world by allowing and expecting people that are interacting with services to be able to do some level of that for themselves, utilising technology. And then we have the humans in the background that can, really just dip in when the actual person-to-person interactions are needed. So yeah, that's where I'd say probably not, big sky dreaming here 5 months in, but definitely innovation will play a part in just creating more efficiency. And then hopefully as we start to create a bit of a buffer in what we've got in our finances, then true innovation will come from sort of, I guess, paying for the grander projects.
Yep.
I want to ask you, for our listeners, for some advice from you on how to overcome fear stopping you doing things. Because I know of two amazing opportunities that you've had through overseas travel, one from an education and one meeting some pretty interesting folks that most people don't meet. So perhaps tell the story of what sort of amazing opportunities you've had overseas, and then perhaps we'll talk about how overcoming fear or failure to overcome fear would not have let those things happen. And in people's lives, often they have fears that are not big. Fear is big for you if it's your fear, right? But failure to overcome it blocks opportunity for so many different things. But Liz has had two amazing overseas opportunities that most people haven't had. Do you want to share those?
Gosh, when you asked me to talk about like fear, my mind could have gone in so many different directions on that. So I'll try to link them all for you and for everyone else. But I think where I first went when you asked me, there was the initial fear of even getting into the role that created the opportunity for me to go overseas. So when I was originally offered to step into an executive role, it was, not in a conventional way. It was in a period of time where there was a lot of disruption in the organisation. I knew that if I took that opportunity, which I desperately wanted, I was ambitious and career focused, as I've already sort of explained, being offered to step into an executive role was exactly the pathway I thought I would be going on, knowing that would come with a need to very quickly try and turn around the perspectives of a few hundred people that wouldn't have wanted me to do that was the fear factor in even stepping straight in. And for me, it was, what am I more scared of? Am I more scared of having to step into that and, manage people's feedback and manage my feelings and manage all the things? Or am I more scared that if I don't, I would have lost an opportunity. And if I don't, I might not be able to do all of this grand change work that I want to make. So again, I stepped into the fear of, making sure that I felt like I could manage. There's always something fearful. I felt like I could manage the fear of being, confronted with people being negative about it and making sure that I could stand up and just really quickly reestablish trust and show that I was there for the right reasons and show that I could have some really quick wins that would then help them do their work better. And I think then...
So you knew people would be mad with you, but you did it anyway.
I did, yeah, I absolutely did. And I knew that the people that were mad at me wouldn't be afraid to tell me that they were mad at me.
They did, they were vocal about it.
Yes. But again, like the reason that I was able to kind of work with that, I think I knew that I would establish trust by being really transparent. I knew that I would just have to manage myself in walking up and having a really direct conversation, sit down straight away with the people that I knew wouldn't be that happy and say, now we need to make a choice. We can either both be unhappy trying to work together, or we can find a way to be okay with working together and work on what the good outcomes actually will be. And so that was sort of my entry to the executive. And I think, that fear doesn't really go away, because then I had a lot of imposter syndrome being in a first executive role, taking that on. Really, all of that ambition and drive suddenly came to like a reality point where it was like, okay, now it's serious. Now you actually have this level of responsibility. Are you really ready for it? I was sitting around a table of much more experienced people than I was, who I think, played up that imposter syndrome for me being part of that team. So it was actually a very scary time. And then, leading to how this was all, in the same kind of timeline as then the opportunities to go overseas came up. And when the opportunities came up to travel, I was on maternity leave. So I had just had my second child. So I actually joined the executive team soon after having my first baby. And then when I had my second child, I remember taking maternity leave from an executive role that I knew I didn't want to be away from for too long. So thankfully, was working for an organisation where it was okay to go and meet the CEO with a 3-month-old baby and like pass him back and forth over the table. We had my son come to board planning and be pushed around the room by a range of different people, all wonderful things. But at the same time, I was then told by Paul that I would have the opportunity to potentially go to Stanford to be part of a program that was about leading change in organisational renewal, something that was an amazing opportunity that we were going to do as a whole of executive team. And my decision really was either miss out on the opportunity because the executive were going as a team and I didn't have to go, but I could go and be part of that opportunity to then bring the learnings back to our organisation, or continue returning to work and working part-time in my return. And I did, think that was a fear factor. I knew that by that stage I would have had a 9-month-old child. I was going to be, traveling overseas. I was going to be taking on all of that. And the other fear factor that when you said, tell us about what you're afraid of, flying. That's actually like my number one fear is aeroplanes. But, you can't put aside the fact that being offered an opportunity to study at an international university in an executive education program that only a very few number of people actually get entry into, and we'd been accepted, was huge. And so I was sitting with that around the very same time as then another absolutely like crazy opportunity arose. So SYC, which is where I was at the time still in the executive role, was partnered with the Prince's Trust. So the then Prince Charles has the Prince's Trust came to Australia.
The King's Trust.
Now, there we go. And at that point, we were partnering around doing some really innovative work with young people around entry to employment. So outside of the funding arrangements of traditionalism in how those Commonwealth employment services were running, what we wanted to do as not-for-profit organisations with our own sort of rules was look at how to really embed different approaches that were much more around young people and self-determination. And therefore, so the organisation was offered an opportunity to go and work for a period of time in Glasgow on actually producing an international model for supporting children and young people to avoid post-traumatic stress. And the real fortune came to me because being part of the executive at SYC, but also having such a strong clinical background in the social services meant that I was the best fit for the organisation to send to this amazing international opportunity to work with 10 other people from around the world on creating an international resource that could be translated and allow for volunteers in any country to really step up as community members years into that more social services role and help children and young people through what they were seeing as, or potentially traumatic circumstances. And that trip included actually working directly for the then Prince Charles, which, you just can't kind of find opportunities like this that come up any day. So I got to go to Glasgow, work with the Prince's Trust internationally on behalf of SYC, produced a wonderful resource, went to dinner with Prince Charles, King Charles. I'm having a hard time putting that together now. Meet and greet, the whole thing. It was absolutely wonderful, which then lined up with going to Stanford as well, which then lined up with, all of my kind of ambition and passion and everything rolling up into one huge ball of being 5 weeks away on the other side of the world from my very young children.
Wow.
So
and overcoming a almost crippling fear of flying.
Absolutely.
I remember sitting next to Liz and she said, "Don't even look at me. Don't talk to me and don't look at me." And she was like, I've never seen anybody, I've heard of people who are afraid of flying, but I've never seen anybody like you really are.
Actually afraid.
So,
That's awesome.
it's the courage as we wrap up, I think the thing that if for our listeners to take away as well is that, the old saying of courage is not the absence of fear, but the recognition of fear and then doing it anyway. Mm-hmm. And Liz is a perfect example of somebody who has seen, has had the opportunity to say no to lots of opportunities because of very reasonable fear of things happening and keeps doing it, keeps showing up afraid of doing things and winning, which is amazing, Liz. So
thank you.
Thank you for today. One more. Go on.
I've got
you've got another one. Go.
Another one. What would you say if there's someone at Kudos, for example, they might be in their 20s and they just look at you, they just listen to this episode that, wow, that's awesome. I want to be where Liz is one day. And they email you like you did back in the day. Would you encourage that? What would you say? What would you do? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I would absolutely encourage that. I think, overcoming the fear to interact with someone is the first step. And you need to be okay with that, because in every role, if you're going to be a leader, human to human interaction, and sometimes very scary, where you have to kind of introduce yourself and put out there what you would like to say, is the fundamental to that. So I welcome that. I'm very happy to be contacted and very happy to work with people around, aligning what I'd say where I'm good, I think, to be encouraging this is around that, so aligning social purpose with your own vision for your career. I think those two things can go very well together, and understanding how what you want to achieve out of your career can be done very, very well in line with, the identity that you have in terms of your values and drive. So I think that, everyone, if you have an idea, you see a gap in what you're delivering, you see an opportunity to be more efficient, you see an opportunity that will help you in your career that also helps the organisation that you're currently working for or would aspire to work for, those are the things to bring to light for people. I think, again, taking that startup approach, many founders have this natural ability to say, I'm here to solve a problem and I'm willing to back myself to be able to solve that problem. And that skill is entrepreneurial, taught in sort of business and those environments, and we don't often allow that in the front lines of our workforce in traditional entities. And I'd say that is exactly what I would love to encourage all of my employees within Kudos to think of themselves as at least entrepreneurs, if not entrepreneurs, and be okay with sort of putting their hand up and saying, I can see a problem, I'm the right one to solve it, this is how I'm going to do it, and just backing themselves to be able to do that.
Awesome.
That's what I'd like to create.
Thanks, Liz.
What would 16-year-old Liz give today's Liz as advice?
Oh gosh, that I saw that question in your list and I didn't actually even know what to answer. I think so. If I can go back a step beyond 16, I know you've used that, but actually I think my changeover year was when I was 14. So something happened when I turned 14, and I went from a very quiet child to a child that sort of overnight kind of woke up, dyed my hair purple, got some piercings, and thought I was a different human. And so, and I think And I think it's really that version of me that is in the back of my mind all the time, that is like, you knew that you wanted to rebel against something, and that came from being curiously questioning, but do I really need to do it like that, or is there a better way? And I think that's what my teenage self would say to me is, continue to curiously question the rules or the expectations, and just make sure that they're still the direction you want to go. Is this for obligation, or is this actually because it's something you're choosing? That's the advice I think my teenage self gives me.
So you're a more conventionally dressed same person.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like you still have that rebellion inside you.
I've kept the nose ring to remind myself.
Great.
Now that we've cut, let's get into the serious stuff. Your 3 favourite songs, the songs that come on the radio and still make you smile.
Oh gosh, 3 favourite actual songs. That's going to be really hard. I would say, can I do artists instead? Because it would be any of those songs. Anything by Nirvana. I'm so 90s kid, so Nirvana, anything by Faith No More, or a bit of the hard rock, Machine Head. If anything from that era comes on the radio, but especially from the rock part of the 90s, that is 100% my space.
Cool.
And your 3 favourite movies.
Oh, Empire Records. I don't know if anyone would know that movie. So I don't have a really strong attraction to movies. I'm more of like a short snippets of things person, but it's just a classic go nowhere kind of movie, to be honest. I really like that. I'm a big fan of Guy Ritchie's productions as well.
Yes.
Yep, me too. Liz, thank you very much. That's been a fantastic conversation.
Thank you. Love it. I can't wait to listen to this episode just as a listener after this has been fully recorded, because you've just shared so many great golden nuggets that I just thank you so much for sharing. I really look up to you.
Thank you.
And thanks.
Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. It's incredible. Thank you very much.